Have you ever realized, in one quiet moment, that your marriage wasn't what you thought it was? Because that's the moment that cracked my life wide open. It happened at a party in Newport Beach, inside a house my money paid for, surrounded by people quietly waiting to see if I'd snap. Her fingers rested casually on Mason's arm while she smiled at the room and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, she joked openly about replacing me, like our marriage was disposable. Every face turned toward me. They were expecting the usual version of me, the weak husband, the predictable provider, the guy who keeps his mouth shut and swallows it. But I didn't move an inch. I lifted my glass, took a slow drink of whiskey, looked her straight in the eyes, and said, "Go ahead." What happened next changed everything for me. My name is Ethan Caldwell. I make my living restoring old buildings, bringing forgotten places back from the edge. While other architects chase glass towers and luxury condos, I work on structures your grandfather might have walked past without a second thought. Brick split by time, wood smoothed down by decades of weather, front porches that have heard 100 fights and just as many quiet apologies. Charleston. Savannah. My days are filled with dust, sweat, and history. It pays well enough. The bills get paid, the fridge stays full, and there's a little money tucked away for later. I never cared about yachts or private planes. My wants were simple. A solid home. A woman who stood on my side. A life that meant something when I looked back at it. That was it. Stability. Loyalty. Respect. I didn't think that was asking for the world. Men like me don't need the whole thing. We just want a small piece we can protect and call our own. For a long time, I truly believed I had that. Then I met Lily Thornton. I can still picture the first night I saw her. A small art gallery in Charleston, nothing high-end or impressive. Exposed brick, cheap wine, decent music playing in the background. She stood in front of a painting like it was speaking directly to her, hands moving as she explained color and light to some bored couple pretending to listen. Her eyes were alive. Not just attractive, focused, sharp, restless. Hungry for something more than a 9-to-5 routine and Netflix nights. We started talking. About old houses, chipped paint, floors that creak when you walk across them. About how some places feel like they remember the people who lived there. Lily didn't mock the idea. She leaned closer, asked thoughtful questions, finished my sentences. That's when I told myself, this is it. This is the woman I can build a life with. The fire in her eyes looked like passion, not ambition. Like a love for beauty, not a hunger for status. Looking back now, I know better. But in that moment, I fell hard for that fire. We found a house in Charleston from the 1920s that everyone else labeled a nightmare. A total project. I saw it as home before we even signed the paperwork. The place was worn down. Floors sagging. A porch that leaned. Walls that had seen more than their share of living. I spent months rebuilding it piece by piece. Long nights sanding, painting, fixing things no one but me would ever notice. Lily chose the furniture, the artwork, the colors. I chose the beams that wouldn't give out while she slept. The first night we moved in, we sat on the floor eating takeout, boxes stacked everywhere. She laughed and said, "Can you believe this is ours?" For a while, that one sentence made every sore muscle worth it. I started taking on more work. Longer hours. Projects I didn't love but couldn't turn down because the money was good. Lily got used to nicer dinners, weekend trips, expensive dresses. I kept telling myself, I'm happy to provide. That's what a man does, right? It didn't change overnight. It never does. At first, it was just new names in her stories. People from Los Angeles. Newport. Men who'd built something big in tech. Women who now only vacationed in Europe. The conversations shifted. Less talk about paintings and old houses. More about square footage, rooftop bars, and who had VIP access next to which minor celebrity. She'd come home energized, talking fast, saying things like, "Ethan is so traditional. He doesn't really understand the new world, but it's kind of cute." Everyone laughed. So did I. That's what you do when your wife turns you into the punchline. You take it. You tell yourself she's joking. But every joke leaves a mark. Small cuts at first. Easy to ignore. Then one night, sitting at the dining table in the house I rebuilt with my own hands, listening to her brag about someone else's life, it hit me, I felt small in my own home. In the one place a man is supposed to feel like he matters. The comments kept coming. Little lines she'd toss out in front of people. Ethan would rather stare at old bricks than actually live a little. Everyone laughed. So I laughed too. That's how you survive it. You play along. You become the easygoing husband who can take a joke, even when it lands like a punch to the ribs. Then the comparisons started. Mason just bought a Tesla on a whim. You're too careful. Too careful. She said it smiling, but every man in that room understood what she really meant. Not bold enough. Not exciting. Not enough. That's when I started seeing the pattern. I was paying for the dinners, the trips, the drinks, and somehow I was also being painted as the boring weight holding her back. I stayed quiet. But somewhere between old bricks and too careful, I realized something ugly. The respect in her eyes was disappearing. And once that's gone, everything else is living on borrowed time. The first time I met him, she was practically glowing. "This is Mason," Lily said. "He's working on this massive new venture in LA." He shook my hand the way men do when they've practiced it. Firm. Polished. A little too intentional. His smile was perfect. His eyes weren't. They slid right past me and locked onto the house. "Nice place," he said, scanning the room like an appraiser. "You could flip this for a lot more, you know." It wasn't praise. It was math. Lily laughed, proud. Mason sees opportunity. Ethan's more sentimental. Sentimental. The word you use for an old dog or a broken chair you should have thrown out years ago. They shared a look after she said it. Brief. Subtle. Just long enough for my stomach to tighten. That's when it clicked. This guy didn't just want my wife's attention. He wanted my seat at the table. My view. The life I built piece by piece long before his name ever crossed our front door. For a long time, I did what most guys do when the truth gets uncomfortable. I argued with myself. I tried to explain away the things I already felt deep down. I kept telling myself that Lily was just having fun, just living a little more than she used to. New friends, new spots around town, nothing wrong with that, right? I didn't want to turn into that jealous husband, the controlling type who reads too much into everything. I'd stand in front of the mirror and tell myself maybe the problem was me. Maybe I was insecure. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe this was just some late-blooming midlife panic playing tricks on my head. Some nights I'd sit alone in our living room, staring at the walls of that old 1920s house, reminding myself we'd built a life there together. Brick by brick. Memory by memory. I'd repeat it like a promise, she wouldn't tear this apart. She wouldn't burn everything down. But logic didn't mean much to my gut. My stomach tightened every time her phone lit up and she subtly angled the screen away from me. Every dinner that ran late. Every half answer that didn't quite explain anything. Every new inside joke I wasn't invited into. All of it started to pile up. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to feel heavier every day. I caught myself checking the clock when she wasn't home. Nothing obsessive. Just enough to notice patterns forming. My brain kept saying, trust her. My gut kept pushing back, telling me something was deeply wrong. And there's a limit to how long you can ignore that feeling before it stops whispering and starts yelling. That's when the Savannah trip came up. 3 days away to close out a hotel restoration deal, solid money, big opportunity. When I told Lily I'd be leaving town, she didn't sigh or roll her eyes like she usually did. Instead, she smiled. And not the tired kind. The easy kind. "You work too much," she said. "But at least I get the house to myself." I laughed, because laughing has always been my reflex. But that sentence stayed with me. At least I get the house to myself. As I drove out of Charleston, something felt off. That quiet, nagging feeling you get when you're pretty sure you locked the front door, but you can't remember hearing the deadbolt click. Savannah itself was beautiful. Historic streets, warm air, postcard views. None of it mattered. I couldn't stop picturing our house. Our bedroom. Our kitchen. Our living room. Not empty, but filled. Just without me. That night, when I checked into the hotel, the room didn't feel like a place to relax. It felt like a waiting room. Like something bad was coming, and I just hadn't been called in yet. The deal wrapped up faster than I expected. Most guys would have stayed an extra night, enjoyed the quiet, padded the expense report. I didn't. All I wanted was to go home. On the way to the airport, I stopped and bought Lily her favorite flowers. Nothing flashy. Just simple ones, the kind she used to love before everything turned into hashtags and rooftop cocktails. Sitting in the cab, I imagined her reaction when I walked in early. Maybe she'd be surprised. Maybe relieved. Maybe happy. Maybe guilty. But beneath all that hope was something else, thumping in my chest. A feeling I didn't have a name for yet, something only fear really understands. When I reached the front door, flowers tucked under my arm, hand on the knob, my gut finally said the sentence I'd been dodging for months: whatever's waiting on the other side of this door, you're not ready for it. For the first time, I hesitated. The door wasn't locked. That was the first thing that felt wrong. I stepped inside. No music playing. No TV murmuring in the background. No "Hey babe" from the kitchen. Just silence. Heavy, expectant silence. The kind that feels like it's watching you. I called her name. Once. Nothing. Then I heard it. Her voice. Soft. Breathy. It was coming from the walk-in closet down the hall. I moved slowly, my grip tightening on the flowers as my hands started to shake. With every step, the house felt smaller, tighter, like it was warning me to turn around. Then I stopped. One step from the doorway. I heard her laugh. A laugh she hadn't shared with me in years. "No, he has no idea," she said. "He's so predictable." That word, predictable, hit me so hard my vision went fuzzy. But the sentence that followed destroyed whatever version of me still existed before that moment. "I'm telling you, the second Mason's ready, I'm done here." My fingers loosened, and the flowers nearly slipped from my hand. I stood there frozen while she kept talking, casual, relaxed, like my life was just background noise in a story she was enjoying. "Mason actually sees me," she said. She talked about me like I was nothing more than a financial safety net. Just a bank. Not a husband. Not a man. Just a resource she planned to drain one last time. And then she said the line that burned itself into my memory forever. She spoke openly about using people until something better came along. I didn't breathe. I didn't swallow. I didn't even blink. The flowers felt ridiculous, like something you'd bring to the funeral of a marriage you didn't know was already dead. So I pulled out my phone and hit record. Her voice stayed steady. Clear. Confident. She wasn't confessing. She was proud. And strangely, in that moment, something inside me didn't shatter. It shut down. I don't remember walking out of the house. I just remember placing the flowers on the hallway table, like a small, silent memorial no one would ever visit. I drove to a nearby hotel and checked in under my own name, even though no one asked. I sat on the edge of the bed, shoes still on, staring out at a city that suddenly didn't feel familiar at all. You'd think that's when I would have broken. Punched a wall. Screamed. Cried. Called someone and fallen apart. None of that happened. What I felt instead was cold, sharp clarity. The woman I loved wasn't in that house anymore. She'd left long before I ever boarded that plane to Savannah. What remained was someone wearing her face and carefully planning her exit. I played the recording again, not to torture myself, but to lock it in. To make sure I never softened it later. Never convinced myself it wasn't that bad. Sitting there on that stiff hotel bed, I made a decision. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to rage. I was going to rebuild. Without her. The next morning, I drove straight to Atlanta. I didn't tell Lily. I didn't leave a note. I just got in the truck and went. Victor Langley, my family attorney, sat across from me as I pressed play. Lily's voice filled the office. Ethan is just a bank. You don't leave a bank until you've got another one lined up. Victor didn't flinch. Didn't even blink. When it ended, he took off his glasses and said calmly, "All right, Ethan. What do you want?" I didn't talk about betrayal. I didn't talk about heartbreak. That version of me was already gone. I want to protect what I've built, I said. And then I want to be free of her. He nodded once. Calm. Focused. Surgical. Then we do this quietly, he said. No emotions. Just facts. And sitting there in that office, I felt it, the shift. This wasn't about pain anymore. What I was planning wasn't an argument or a confrontation. It was a controlled demolition. And demolition, done right, takes patience and precision. Luckily, I knew exactly how to dismantle a structure without bringing the whole thing down on myself. Victor wasn't finished either. The moment I walked into his office, he moved like a man who'd been expecting this call. We went through everything, line by line. Business agreements. Property titles. Savings accounts. Investment portfolios. Just lines of ink on paper, but every one of them represented 20 years of early mornings, late nights, and missed weekends. Then he reminded me of something I'd nearly forgotten. The prenup. Lily had signed it back when she still believed love alone would protect us forever. Back when she thought saying, "We'll never need this," sounded romantic. The language was clear. If she cheated, she walked away with almost nothing. The catch was simple, I had to prove it. That's when the restructuring started. Certain assets were moved into trusts where my name no longer sat front and center. Business ownership was tightened. Loose ends were tied off. Anything that could be grabbed in a messy divorce was quietly secured. And while all of that was happening behind the scenes, life at home stayed exactly the same. Same dinners. Same empty conversations. Same forced smiles across the table. Lily thought she was being clever, funneling money into her little art fund under the radar. What she didn't know was that every transfer, every skim, every small act of theft she felt proud of was being documented by Victor. And the prenup she never bothered to read was sitting patiently in the background. The bank she thought she was robbing was already sealing its vault. Victor's advice was short and ruthless. Let her keep moving the money. Don't stop her. Just document everything. So that's what I did. I watched our accounts like a quiet accountant in the corner. Every time Lily shifted money into that fund, I didn't argue. I didn't block the transaction. I took a screenshot, sent it to Victor, and filed it away. She genuinely believed I was blind. That I was still the same predictable man she'd laughed about on the phone. Something strange happens when you stop seeing yourself as the victim. The things that once crushed you start to look different. Cleaner. Sharper. Like proof. Every transfer she made stopped being theft and started becoming evidence. Her secret plan slowly turned into my leverage. I wasn't tied to the chair anymore. I was watching her tighten the rope herself. Click by click. Transaction by transaction. She wasn't just stealing from me, she was building the case that would end the life she loved. And I didn't have to do anything to help her. Except press save. While she focused on draining accounts, I started draining something else, my presence from that house. I rented a small apartment under the company name. Nothing fancy. Just solid walls and a door she didn't have a key to. Then I began moving things. Not furniture. Not decorations. The parts of my life she'd stopped seeing years ago. My father's watch. Old family photos. A few paintings that actually meant something. One item at a time. Slipped into a bag. Carried to the truck. Driven across town. Every trip back to the Charleston house made it feel less like a home and more like a showroom built around her ego. Designer mirrors. Statement chairs. Pieces meant to impress strangers, not to live with. She never noticed what disappeared. Not once. She didn't notice the empty nail where a family photo had hung for a decade. That's when it finally clicked. She only saw what was shiny. What looked good. What reflected her. Not what mattered. Not me. So I kept going. Quietly removing anything with weight or meaning until all that remained was the shell she'd chosen over the man who built it. And she never noticed a thing. At home, I kept the mask on. Busy. Slightly distant. But harmless. Lily would sit at the counter, wine glass in hand, telling me about parties in Newport, dinners in L.A. Wild nights with her new crowd. Mason's name started slipping into the stories more often, first casually, then like he'd always belonged there. I answered the same way every time. That's nice. She took my silence as weakness. As approval. The less I reacted, the bolder she became. The jokes sharpened. The eye rolls became obvious. She'd interrupt me, correct me, toss out comments about how I wouldn't understand the world she lived in now. It hurt. Any man who says it wouldn't is lying. But every disrespectful comment also became another brick in the wall I was building between us. Proof I'd need later, when the part of me that still loved her tried to forget. Lily looked at me and saw a man who'd never leave. She had no idea I'd already found the exit and mentally walked halfway through it. One night, we had dinner with some of my oldest clients. People who'd been with me since the beginning, back when I was just a guy with a truck and a toolbox. It mattered to me. Deals were on the line. Referrals. Future work. Lily showed up polished and loud. Too much wine, too fast. At first, she was charming, laughing, telling stories, soaking up attention. Then she turned the spotlight on me. He's obsessed with work, she said, smiling too wide. He'd rather stare at blueprints all weekend than take me to Malibu with Mason. The table went dead quiet. You could feel everyone's eyes shift from her to me. I smiled thinly, took a sip of water, and said nothing. Not because it didn't sting, but because I already knew this wasn't the place I'd fight. That night, she didn't just disrespect me as a husband. She undercut me as a man in front of people who trusted me. And sitting there in that heavy silence, I understood something clearly. When I finally moved, it wouldn't be out of anger. It would be final. Not long after that dinner, Lily came to me glowing with excitement. There's going to be a huge party in Newport Beach this summer, she said. At our place. It's going to be massive. She wanted everyone there. Her new L.A. crowd. The Newport people. And just enough familiar faces from Charleston to make it all look legitimate. Old life and new life packed into one room, all centered on her. I said yes to everything. The caterer. The bar. The DJ. The decor. Every invoice that landed in my inbox got approved without a single question. If she wanted an audience, I was going to make sure she had one when the curtain finally fell. I called Victor and gave him the date. We aligned everything so the paperwork would be finalized that morning. Trusts locked. Accounts secured. Divorce filed. All that would remain was for me to speak the words out loud. Somewhere in the middle of planning that party, I realized the truth. There was no version of my future where Lily stayed. That night in Newport wasn't just a party anymore, it was the point of no return. On the day of the event, Lily moved through the house like she owned every inch of the coastline. Staff scurried around, lights were being arranged, glasses lined up in perfect rows. She stood at the center of it all, barking orders, fussing over details no one else would ever notice, acting like the queen of a kingdom she hadn't paid for. Her silver dress caught every flicker of light, sparkling like it knew it was meant to be seen. It wasn't just a dress, it was a declaration. Look at me. Only me. And right there beside her, as if it had been preordained, stood Mason, laughing when she laughed, nodding whenever she spoke. He looked like a man trying on someone else's life, seeing if it fit. I wandered the house slowly, balcony, pool, living room, bar, not to inspect the setup, but to feel the edges of the life I was about to leave behind. I paused at the windows, letting the weight of it settle in. I built this. Every paycheck, every grueling project, every late night had shaped these walls around her. And tonight, I was walking away, finally free. Just before the guests arrived, Lily drifted over to me. She pressed a quick, practiced kiss to my lips, no warmth, just a touch. Try not to be boring tonight, okay, she said, already half-turned. I glanced at her, then at the house, and simply nodded. I'll do my best. In the inner pocket of my jacket sat the divorce papers we'd filed that morning. My name. Hers. The legal closure of something that had already been dead for a long time. My phone buzzed. A text from Victor, all set. That was it. 2 words. No fanfare. No congratulations. Just confirmation that the exit was clear. I slipped the phone back in my pocket and stepped out onto the balcony. The ocean lay calm, the lights along the water steady, almost serene. I breathed it in, not the view, but the ending. I wasn't just saying goodbye to a house or a party. I was leaving behind the man who had tolerated it all. When the party kicked off, it came alive instantly, music, laughter, champagne glasses catching the light. Guests flowed across the deck and around the pool like they'd been waiting their whole lives for this invitation. Maybe some of them had. Lily planted herself by the bar, exactly where everyone could see her. Mason hovered at her side, hand resting on the small of her back like he'd earned the place. They laughed together as if they shared years of history, not a secret fling built on stolen money and fleeting moments. I kept my distance, leaning on the railing, watching it all like a play whose lines I already knew. A few of my old Charleston friends were there too, their expressions betraying confusion, half-formed questions. They noticed the way Lily leaned toward Mason, the way he moved as if the house were his. And then I understood something chilling. Tonight wasn't just the end of my marriage. It was a line in the sand. After this, everyone in the room would have to choose, stand in her world, or stand in mine. From my vantage point, I saw it clearly. Mason's hand slid onto the small of Lily's back like it had been there 1,000 times. She didn't flinch, didn't move it. She leaned closer, heads tilted together, whispering inside jokes no one else could hear. That's the thing about secrets, they make people careless. At one point, Lily turned to a small circle of guests, champagne in hand, eyes bright. "This is Mason," she announced. "He's someone very important in my future." Her future. She said it like I was already a chapter she'd finished with. A few people glanced at me, waiting for the jealous husband routine, expecting me to mark my territory. I didn't. I just took a sip of my drink, letting a faint smile curl at the corner of my mouth. They thought I was clueless. But the truth was simple. They weren't looking at their future, they were toasting the last night of it. Later, I noticed her little circle forming by the pool, the stage she loved most, tipsy, adored, center of attention. Lily launched into her favorite routine. "Ethan is dependable," she said, drawing out the word. "Too dependable. Boring dependable." The group laughed. A few glanced at me, half expecting the usual, me, the good-natured husband, playing along. But I set my glass down and walked into the circle without a word. Just calm, hands in pockets. She noticed, but she was too deep in the performance to stop. Too sure of the script, where I was always the punchline. She sipped her drink, laughed a little too loudly, and went for it. "I could dump you right now for a little excitement, you know? The circle erupted into nervous, drunk laughter, unsure if it was funny or cruel. Some looked at me, waiting for my usual self-deprecating response. I didn't give it. I swirled my whiskey, letting the ice clink against the glass. It sounded louder than the music, louder than the pool, louder than her laugh. I stared at Lily, not Mason, not the crowd, just her. Go ahead, I said quietly, like signing for a package. The laughter died. Her grin froze, then cracked, right there in her shiny new world. For the first time in years, I watched her realize I wasn't playing along anymore. Ethan, don't be dramatic, she snapped, color draining from her face. I tilted my head. You wanted excitement, I said softly. Let's give everyone a show. I turned to the people around us, the friends, the clients, the leeches, the spectators. Since we're all here, I said, letting the words linger, that was the moment I finally spoke my truth. Nervous chuckles. A cough somewhere. Someone shifted in their chair. The circle tightened around her. I didn't stop. All those lunches in L.A. The weekend in Malibu, the gifts that didn't appear on any of our statements. Mason's face went pale, as if someone had yanked the air from his lungs. A few of the guests glanced between him, Lily, and me. The space felt heavy, charged. This is Mason, I said evenly. You've all met him tonight. What you don't know is, I've known about him for months. The music, the chatter, the laughter, everything faded into background noise. They thought I was unraveling. They were actually just starting the opening act. I let the silence stretch before I pressed in. You all know Lily loves art, I said. But what you don't know is she loves her little art fund even more. She flinched, subtle but telling. That's the private account, I continued, where she's been quietly moving money. A few thousand here, a few thousand there. December, January, February, I listed dates, approximate amounts, enough for anyone who understood finance to go still. Lily's hand shook around her glass. Ethan, stop, she whispered. I didn't flinch. You didn't marry a bank, Lily, I said softly, but firmly. You married a man. Her eyes glossed over, as if reality was bending and she was trying to rewrite it midstream. And just so we're clear, I added, letting the words settle, I didn't hear this from gossip. I have a recording. That little call you made in our closet, the one where you laughed and called me just a bank, joking about not leaving until another one was lined up? A few people gasped. She had nothing to say. Not a word. I let the pause stretch before finishing the scene. The divorce papers? Filed this morning. Calm, factual. So when you said you could dump me for excitement, a little late, don't you think? Someone choked on their drink. I didn't pause. Your things, I said, the ones you actually paid for, which, surprisingly, isn't much, are at your mother's place. Everything else stays with the man who bought it. Her mouth opened, then closed again. Oh, and the joint accounts? I asked. Frozen. Effective today. I let that land. Cards? Cancelled about an hour ago. So, if you were planning to check into a hotel tonight, the guests shifted. Whispers. Sharp inhalations. Eyes darting. Lily looked stripped bare, exposed, like someone had cut the power on the life she'd built. I turned to Mason. You're taking care of her, right? I asked. You're the exciting one. He couldn't meet her eyes. Mason was the first to fold. He swallowed, glanced at her, glanced at the crowd. Hey, this is between you two, he muttered, hands raised like he'd stumbled into the wrong scene. Then he stepped back. One step. Another. Until he disappeared into the throng. Lily's eyes searched for him, but he was gone. Her friends, the guests, the crowd, suddenly their phones, drinks, the floor, anything became more interesting than her. Nobody stepped closer. Nobody reached for her shoulder. I set my glass down on the nearest table. Enjoy the rest of the evening, I said. Clear, calm. Not a shout. Not a farewell. Just a statement. And then I walked toward the front door. No dramatic pause. No parting glance. Behind me, chaos erupted. Her voice, someone trying to calm her, chairs scraping, whispers sharpening. But that storm was in a house I no longer lived in. For the first time in years, my back was to it, and I didn't care to fix it. The week after, my phone didn't stop. Texts from Lily came like machine gun fire, cruel, heartless, ungrateful. I destroyed her reputation, humiliated her, ruined her perfect life. Not a word about the affair. Not a word about the money. Just about the fact that I'd stopped performing my assigned role. I sat in my new place in Charleston, bare walls, simple furniture, quiet, and read every message once. Not to torture myself, but to remember. Then I archived them. No reply. Not a single word. The old me would have driven across town at midnight, apologizing for things I didn't do, just to keep the peace. This time, the silence was the best part. I realized something important that week: my silence used to mean weakness. Now it meant boundaries. I wasn't ignoring her to punish her, I was choosing myself over her chaos. Her messages shifted. Screaming turned to pleading. Can we just talk like adults? Newport got out of hand. It was a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding. Months of lies, theft, and betrayal reduced to a single word. Then, I can change. I'll cut off Mason. We can fix this. She weaponized nostalgia, our first house, takeout nights on the floor, road trips, inside jokes, trying to manipulate me with the past. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. The old husband in me wanted to say yes. But I knew better. Even a crack of that door would lead me back into a building already burned to the ground. So I didn't reply. For the first time, I refused to let good memories blind me to the present. Love had a history. Respect didn't. Then came the voicemails. 3 a.m. Her voice broken. I have nothing without you, she sobbed. I can't work. I can't sleep. I can't breathe. Mason had blocked her. Friends from Newport weren't answering. The party was over. The room empty. For a moment, my chest twisted. I'm not made of stone. I did love her once. But now I understood the difference between consequence and cruelty. This wasn't punishment, it was the reckoning coming due. I listened through every word. Then I hit delete. No reply. No comfort. No, we'll figure it out. I sat in the quiet of my new place. No ocean view. No designer anything. Just 4 honest walls and the sound of my own breathing. For the first time in years, her crisis wasn't my problem. Lily didn't crawl back. She hired a shark. He walked in sharp suit, sharper smile, sharp lies. He painted me as the cold, controlling husband isolating her, withholding money, abandoning his poor, misunderstood wife. I let him speak. I let the lies hang in the air. Victor sat beside me, hands folded, face unreadable. Waiting. Patient. When it was our turn, he didn't raise his voice. He slid a folder across the table, prenup. Financial records. Transfer logs to her art fund. Dates, amounts, every little theft she thought invisible. Then he lifted his phone. Your Honor, with permission, we'd like to play a short recording. The judge nodded. And there it was, her voice, unmistakable, filling the courtroom. Ethan is just a bank. You don't leave a bank until you have another one lined up. Followed by her laughter. I watched the judge's expression tighten, the room shift. In that instant, it wasn't my word against hers anymore. It was her own voice standing beside me, undeniable. The ruling was procedural. Quick. Clinical. But the conclusion was simple: prenup valid. Infidelity clear. Lily wasn't getting half of anything. She was left with what she had agreed to years ago, a small amount, enough to live, not enough to keep pretending she'd built anything herself. She tried to protest. Her lawyer tried to argue. But there was nothing left. No money. No case. No story that could survive the recording. Even her own attorney gave up. He leaned in, muttered something I couldn't hear, and walked out first. I left the courthouse clutching a thin stack of papers. I was no longer her husband. Walking down those steps, I realized the truth. I hadn't lost Lily that day. I lost her the night she decided I was just a bank. This was simply the law acknowledging reality. News of her life trickled in, not from stalking, but through the people still orbiting both our worlds. She was back at her mother's apartment. Small. Thin walls. Shared space. No ocean view. No designer candles. She took a job at a real estate agency, selling vacation rentals to tourists, walking strangers through other people's dream homes for a commission. The car she once adored, the bags, the shoes, all showing up online, one by one, lightly used, excellent condition. Resale sites. Price tags. DMs for details. The queen of status symbols now reduced to listings. The black Uber she once glided through town and replaced by a bus, moving slowly down streets she once surveyed from the backseat of a hired car. And the people who once called her queen? Silent, the moment her lifestyle vanished. I won't lie, there was a dark satisfaction. But mostly, it just looked like what it was, the cost of her choices, finally billed in full. My own life, in contrast, had shrunk in all the right ways. Most mornings now, I sit on the balcony of my Charleston apartment with a mug of coffee, watching a city I've known for years feel brand new, free of pretension. Inside, the place is entirely mine. Books stacked where they're read, not staged. Architectural drawings rolled out on the table. A couch that's comfortable first, aesthetic second. No sharp, cold art screaming for attention. No furniture bought just to impress strangers online. This is life unfiltered. Life I can finally breathe in. I still work a lot, probably always will. But it feels different now. I'm not chasing someone else's image anymore. I'm restoring buildings because I love the weight of old brick under my hands, the way a saved structure stands firm when the world around it crumbles. At night, the quiet in my home isn't tense or hollow. It's soft. Honest. For the first time in years, I walk through my front door and think one word: home. Here's the truth, straight up. Men don't actually want that much. A safe place to sleep. Someone in your corner. A little respect when you step inside your own door. That's it. Not yachts. Not private jets. Not whatever the internet tells you makes life worth living. I used to think giving Lily the whole world would be enough. Turns out she didn't want a real world, she wanted an escape from it. For years, I let her call me a provider, like it was a compliment, while treating me like a background character with a credit card. Not anymore. I'm not a bank. I'm not an ATM. I'm a man. And now, I live like it. I protect what I build. I don't beg for value. And I don't stay in places where my presence is treated like a bill that's overdue. If this resonates in your chest, you already know what I mean. Every now and then, someone mentions seeing Lily. A buddy told me he spotted her at a bar, cheap wine, tired eyes, loud and desperate. She was telling anyone who'd listen that her life had been stolen. That's her story. In it, she's the victim, blindsided, abandoned, punished by a cruel system. She talks like someone broke into her perfect life and took it all. But I was there. I know the truth. Her life wasn't stolen. She traded it. Loyalty for excitement. Respect for attention. A solid life for the promise of something shinier, without a foundation underneath. I don't feel joy hearing about her. I don't feel pity either. I feel distance, like I'm listening to someone else's story. Because nothing was stolen. It was given away. Looking back, it's all a straight line from that night in Newport, to the bouquet dying on the hallway table, to the hotel room, to the courtroom, and finally to this quiet apartment that finally feels like mine. Here's what I've learned: the most powerful thing a man can do is walk away silently. Not slam doors. Not write long, bitter texts. Not beg for respect or love. You can't argue someone into valuing you. You can't force them to see your worth. But you can leave the places where you're treated like luck to be there. I rebuilt my life from the ground up. This time, I built it for me. If this hits something in your chest, ask yourself a hard question: what are you still building on a rotten foundation? And how long will you call it home? If you're still listening, hit follow, drop a comment, and stick around. There's more to this story.